Now, if you notice, wherever you see Saturn, you also always tend to see a lot of symbolism dealing with the color black. The black gods, the black cube. It's almost like black and Saturn go hand in hand. And so the question is, what is up with that connection between Saturn and the color black? Well, there's a very old form of chemistry, a really ancient scientific practice called alchemy. And alchemy has been placed into the category of pseudoscience for a really long time now. It's become less and less accepted as a legit form of science by the majority of the scientific community, mainly because of what the people who were practicing it were trying to do, because they were trying to use chemistry to turn base metals into precious metals. So like turning copper into silver, or turning zinc into aluminum, back when aluminum was still considered a precious metal. And the main focus, the ultimate goal, was to turn lead into gold, to take that low grade base metal of lead and to somehow take it through the perfect set of steps to finally get it to turn into gold at the end. And there were two different types of alchemists. You had the alchemists who would try to transform metal, and then you had spiritual alchemists, the alchemists who were trying to use those same steps of alchemy to strengthen the spiritual side of themselves and to get that spiritual side to the highest level that it could go, with the intent of getting that spiritual side strong enough to overcome the limitations of the physical. So basically to really reach that state of mind over matter, and to get to the point where they weren't affected by things like disease and even death. And this whole process was broken down into 7 steps. And those 7 steps were symbolized by the 7 rungs of a ladder, with that final step or that final rung representing full spiritual enlightenment or full transformation, bringing the physical side completely together with the spiritual side. And each one of these steps was represented by a different metal. And each different metal was linked to one of the 7 chakra points of the body. And they were both ultimately linked to a particular planet. And the very first step on that ladder, called calcination, is connected to the planet Saturn. And Saturn is connected to the root chakra and represented by lead. Now, the reason that lead is used as that very first metal in the steps of alchemy is because of a lot of its attributes. It's being used to represent the lowest state of the mind. Because if you think about it, lead is one of the heaviest metals. So it can be really hard to maneuver and to handle. But at the same time, it's very soft. All it takes is the scratch of a fingernail to put an impression into lead. So it's very easy to manipulate the shape of lead. It's also one of the most dangerous metals. And when dealing with it, you got to worry about things like lead poisoning, which builds up in the body slowly over time. So at this stage, you can look at the mind in the same way. Hard to handle, but easily manipulated, easily reshaped, and easily reformed. And a high possibility of being extremely toxic if it's not handled the right way. And then with the root chakra, obviously out of all the 7 chakras, the root chakra is the lowest chakra. And so it's dealing with your lower nature, your basic instincts. And it's basically the foundation of all the rest of the chakras. So if that root chakra is unbalanced, it pretty much sends everything else out of whack. You can pretty much forget about all the rest of the chakras. That root chakra is where the stability of everything else starts. And when you have an unstable root chakra, it means that you're basically given completely into the physical and allowing yourself to be controlled by your lower nature. And the root chakra is connected to the earth. So it's the one chakra that keeps you grounded here and can keep you grounded here if you never learn how to control it, how to discipline it. And then the color of the root chakra is also red. And if used in the right way, that red can symbolize stability, security, confidence. But just think about an unstable root chakra, somebody giving fully into their lower nature. And then think about that classic depiction of the red devil and that idea that the devil uses all of the riches and the pleasures of the physical world to tempt you and to ultimately take control of you and to bring you down to his level and to get you to serve him and ultimately to destroy you. You know how they say an idle mind is the devil's playground. So a mind that's not being put to use is vulnerable to the temptations of the devil. So you've got the red devil and the red root chakra, or your lower self, your lower nature, which is being worked on in that first step of alchemy. And this is all happening through a process called calcination. And in chemistry, calcination is the process of raising a solid object up to a high temperature, just below the melting point. And the purpose is to remove any toxic substances, any impurities, and sometimes even removing any organic matter. And it can literally be looked at as a process of purification. So think about that from a spiritual standpoint. Removing impurities, removing toxic elements, and separating yourself from matter. Removing matter from the equation and starting that process of allowing the mind to take over matter. It's kind of what you're getting from this process of calcination from an alchemical standpoint. Now, because this first step is all about burning away all those toxins, impurities, and using that heat to remove yourself from that matter. And because all of this is connected to Saturn, in alchemy, Saturn is actually looked at as the black sun. And this process of calcination is called the negrito, or the blackness. And in this phase, when all those things are removed, all those toxins, impurities, symbolically, you're brought down to the most uniform form of existence, black matter. And because it's the first stage in this process of alchemy, it's also the most difficult and the most negative stage. So they usually use what looks like a lot of dark, scary imagery to illustrate this process, because it's supposed to be the most frightening step, letting go of physical attachments, things that you might want to hold on to, but you actually need to let go of. It really starts to tear away at your ego and forces you to face that hard reality of just exactly who you really are underneath the surface, without all those physical things to hide behind. It's the most difficult stage because it's literally like a full detox from the physical, letting go of the material world completely. And through this concept, the black sun, or Saturn, is supposed to be at the forefront of all of this, making this process happen. Now, this black sun symbolism would also end up getting adopted by the Nazis in Germany. And most people think that this was a secret symbol for the Nazis because there's no known images of them actually using the symbol in public. They never used it out in the open, but there's a large mosaic of the black sun inside one of the Nazi castles in Germany. And there's supposed to be all this mystery surrounding what they actually used it for. Nobody really has an answer as to what the connection between the black sun and the Nazis was. But we know for sure that Hitler and the Nazis went around to all these ancient civilizations stealing information. And that's how they eventually got the swastika. And some people actually think it was the substitute for the swastika. And it was supposed to represent the rise of the Aryan race and their conquest to dominate and take complete control of the planet. And we all know what Hitler and the Nazis were all about, bringing about that quote unquote racially pure society devoted to German greatness. And remember where all of this started, where all of these invasions of all of these ancient civilizations of the past stemmed from: the Germanic tribes coming out of Asia and seemingly coming out of nowhere. Nobody knows where these people came from, but we can see clearly where that Nazi ideology comes from. And eventually you would get neo-Nazi groups and other white supremacist groups who would adopt this same symbol of the black sun. You'll see it on flags, shirts, posters, websites that are all connected to these white extremist groups. And on top of the white supremacists, the black sun was also adopted by some groups of Satanists. They used the black sun in the same way as the Baphomet to represent that extreme level of satanic energy, or that lower nature pan energy. Even the singer Shakira got herself into some controversy a couple of years ago because one of her necklaces that was for sale for the tour she was on had the black sun symbolism on it. And people started comparing it to the Nazi symbol, and she started to catch a lot of heat for it. And it got to the point where it was eventually taken down, and she came out and apologized. But whether she was the one that gave the okay for that or not, I don't know. But it's clearly the symbol for the black sun. It doesn't just resemble it. It is the symbol. And again, maybe she had no control over it, but it's still crazy either way. And from alchemy, we know that that black sun is pointing back to Saturn. And there's a lot of places you could go with that whole black sun symbolism. But looking at it from a scientific standpoint, a black sun would technically be a dead star, because when a star dies, if it doesn't completely collapse on itself and become a black hole, then as soon as it cools down and no longer emits any heat or light, it becomes a black dwarf. At least that's the theory anyway. But you got to wonder, where did the inspiration for that theory come from? Now, remember, there is that idea floating out there that at one point Saturn was literally our sun, that it replaced the sun that we see in the sky today. And so when the people in these ancient civilizations looked up in the sky, they would see Saturn, just like we can look up and see the sun today. And when you look at Saturn through a telescope, with the way that it's positioned in the sky, from our vantage point, you can see the planet itself, and then you can see the majority of the rings of Saturn surrounding the planet. And from that vantage point, with the planet in the middle and those rings surrounding the planet, Saturn looks a lot like an eye. It looks like you have the pupil of an eye surrounded by the frame of an eye. And so you can imagine, if Saturn was closer to the Earth at some point in the past, when people looked up in the sky, this is what they would have seen. It literally would have looked like an eye in the sky, like an eye looking down on the planet. Now, we know that Egypt is one of the oldest known civilizations that we know of. And when you look at all of the hieroglyphs and all of the monuments, one of the symbols that you see throughout Egypt the most is the eye. They depicted the eye a lot. You can find the eye all throughout Egypt. And then more specifically in Egyptian mythology, you have the eye of Horus and the eye of Ra, two different eyes that look identical. But of course, those two different eyes both have their own separate origin stories. Now, with the eye of Horus, Horus is the son of two of the most ancient gods, Isis and Osiris. And Horus's father, Osiris, is killed by his own brother, Set, because Set wanted to take his position as the supreme god. But there was one thing in the way of that. Isis and Osiris had a son, Horus. And being Osiris's son, Horus held that rightful position as the supreme god. So Set set out to kill Horus and finally take over as the supreme god. Now, fast forward a little bit, and Horus and Set are battling for the throne. And during that battle, Set gouges out Horus's left eye, literally pulls his eye out. But even despite that, Horus is able to fight off Set, and Set flees. He runs away, and the battle ends. But now Horus has lost his left eye. So Horus goes to one of the elder gods, Hathor, and Hathor restores his eye. And when Horus's eye is fully restored, he offers it over to his father, Osiris, hoping that it can somehow restore his life. And the eye of Horus would go on to symbolize sacrifice, healing, restoration, and protection. And then we have the eye of Ra. And in this version of the mythology, Ra is the supreme god, but he's getting old and he's kind of starting to lose his influence over the people. So he goes to his father, an even more ancient god named Nun. And Nun, by the way, literally represents the ancient waters, the water that has been around since the beginning of time, that everything came from. And the Egyptians believed that all the space outside of Earth was surrounded by water. But Ra goes to his father, Nun, and asks him how he can get back the respect and the reverence of the people. So Nun tells him to sit on his throne and take out his right eye. And the eye immediately takes on its own form and becomes the goddess Sekhmet. And Sekhmet is this bloodthirsty god that immediately goes out and starts causing total destruction. She just continually moves through the earth, causing death everywhere she goes. And when Ra tries to get her to stop, she just keeps going, like she is hell bent on destruction. So Ra sets up a council with the rest of the gods and the people. And they devised this plan to trick Setmet, to bait her in with this vial of blood that's also been contaminated with some stuff that will make her pass out. So Sekhmet falls for it. And while she's out, Ra takes away about half of her power. And when she wakes up, she's still bloodthirsty and still a god of destruction. But now she only uses that power to protect things. And after this, Ra steps down from his throne. And this is when Osiris, the father of Horus, becomes the new supreme god. So from these two mythologies, you can see you have two gods sitting on the same throne, representing the two opposite sides of that throne, the left eye and the right eye. And with that left eye, you're getting healing, restoration, life, positive energy. And then that right eye is connected to destruction, chaos, and death. So of course, negative energy. So you got negative, positive, good, evil. You've got these dual energies being represented by these two eyes, two opposing sides of the same source. Now, once the federal government of the United States was established in the early 1700s, we would get the Great Seal of the United States. And the story behind this thing is that originally Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson were all on a committee to help create the seal. And it ended up getting passed down to two more committees. And we would eventually get the design that we have today, the bald eagle on the front and the Eye of Providence on the back. And in 1935, the front and back of the Great Seal was placed on the back of the $1 bill. But if you take a closer look at that right side with the 13 stars and the bald eagle, and look closely at those 13 stars and how they're arranged. Now, if you notice, they're perfectly aligned to form a hexagram. The stars are lined up in just the right position to give you a hexagram. And then if you notice, you also have a hexagon surrounding that hexagram. And remember, those 13 stars represent the 13 colonies that originally formed the United States. But interestingly enough, you also had 13 states that made up the Confederacy. And this is why when you look at the Confederate flag, it has 13 stars on it. Then just below that in Latin, we have E pluribus unum, which translates to out of many, one. And then just below that is the bald eagle, holding the olive branch on the left and holding arrows on the right. And of course, that olive branch symbolizes peace and the arrows symbolize war. So you've got two dueling energies, just like the Eye of Horus and the Eye of Ra. Positive energy on the left, negative energy on the right. Now, what's interesting about the bald eagle is that in Greek mythology, the god Zeus would sometimes take on the form of an eagle. He would literally transform himself into an eagle. And there's one particular story in Greek mythology where Zeus is looking down from the heavens and notices a young boy named Ganymede. And Zeus becomes infatuated with Ganymede. So Zeus creates a storm and then transforms into his eagle form. And then he flies down, swoops up Ganymede, and takes him back up into the clouds and brings him to his bedside. But there's actually this whole historical conflict over this mythology where a lot of people believe that this story wasn't added in until the 5th century and that the Greco-Romans added it in later because you have writings from Plato about this myth where he literally said that the Greco-Romans made up this story to justify their quote unquote unnatural pleasures. And if that's the case, then this eagle would be more akin to the Baphomet, a representation of that satanic pan energy. And there's definitely a Greek connection to this eagle because just above the eagle, you have Latin writing. Then on the left, we have the Eye of Providence. And at the very top in Latin is Annuit Coptis, which translates to he has favored our undertakings. And they say that he is supposed to be a reference to God. And then at the bottom is Novus Ordo Seclorum, which translates from Latin to a new order of the ages. Now remember, E pluribus unum translates to out of many, one. And so this is where we get a lot of people talking about the one world order or the new world order. And then we have the half pyramid with the Roman numerals 17, 1876, which is the year that the 13 colonies declared independence. And then you have the 13 steps of that half pyramid, which again are supposed to represent the 13 colonies, leading up to the top of the pyramid, which is the all-seeing eye, hovering over those 13 steps, almost like an eye in the sky, with that light illuminating from it as if it was a sun. Now, there is no doubt that they took this directly from ancient Egypt, because on the walls of ancient Egypt is a nearly identical hieroglyph of a pyramid leading up to the sun. So you got a question, what is the all-seeing eye? Is it a sun? Are we looking at the eye of Horus, the eye of Ra? What's going on? Well, if we look at what would seem to be the upper echelon of society, the celebrities, public figures, people with large amounts of notoriety and influence over the masses, at one point or another, you can find instances of what seems like them all doing the same exact thing, throwing up this one eye symbolism. You have all these instances of all these celebrities doing the same exact thing, placing their hand over one of their eyes and leaving just one eye visible. And like I said, it's not just one. It seems like you have just about all of them doing this. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a public figure with some type of celebrity to their name who hasn't done it at one point or another. Musicians, actors, actresses, politicians, anybody with a little bit of notoriety has done this one eye symbolism. And again, it'd be one thing if it was just a few people, but it literally seems like everybody. And it's not just some recent trend, because you can go as far back as the 50s and 60s and still find celebrities and the popular figures during those times making the exact same hand gesture, covering one eye and only exposing that one eye, just giving you that one eye. And it seems to stretch all over the world, no matter what part of the world. The people with influence, the people with stardom, all seem to be throwing up this same thing. And it's not impossible that there's some world-renowned photographer who just loves to take shots of people in this exact same pose. But it's happening all over the world and spanning across different decades, not to mention different industries. And yet everybody is doing the same exact hand gesture. And when you think about it, the one thing that all of these people have in common is that they're all big name personalities. They all have fame and they all have stardom. That celebrity status is the one thing that connects all of them together. So these are the people that are reaping the benefits of society on a large scale. Billionaires, multimillionaires. All of these people are a part of the upper class of society. People who are really reaping the benefits of the material world. And then they have the fame and the notoriety to go along with it. So their material success is on public display for the masses. Everybody is witnessing that success and also watching them reap the benefits of that success, experiencing material gain at the highest level. And remember that full indulgence into the material world, into the physical, is going to lead you to Satan. Because when you fully give into the material world, it becomes matter over mind, that upside down pentagram, just like human beings being chained to that black cube of the devil. And remember those characteristics of the devil, tempting you with the riches and the pleasures of the material world and trying to keep you trapped in your lower nature. And it seems like they're pretty much giving it to you clear as day as to what this one eye symbolism is alluding to. It's like it's all right there in plain sight. You have high profile personalities being used to tempt you with all the things of the material world. And so that one eye is like a universal signal for being a part of that. And it may not even be that deep for a lot of these celebrities. A lot of them might just be posing the way they're being told by a photographer. And that's the end of it. But that still doesn't take away from the influence that these people have over the masses and that power to be able to sway the focus of the masses and to keep the general focus of the masses on the material world. But there is times where the symbolism is so blatant and so in your face that you got to wonder just how much do some of these people really know? And it's hard not to think that they might know a lot more than they're letting on. Sometimes the subliminal messages that some of these people put out are just so blatantly obvious that it just makes you wonder. It's almost like they're just giving it to you outright. And again, maybe they're just posing the way they're being told to pose, and they have no clue where any of this stuff could possibly go. But the symbolism is there. I mean, we know that the CBS logo is an eye, and the guy that created it said that he was inspired by the eye of Providence. And when you look at that eye, it looks almost identical to the way Saturn looks through a telescope. So there's no doubt that that eye is alluding to Saturn. But it seems like there's even more there, because there's times when they'll put the two fingers over their eye and it's clearly alluding back to Egypt and back to the eye of Horus and the eye of Ra. And the only question would be, which eye are they representing? Well, with the rest of this symbolism seemingly leading back to Satan and the material world, lower nature, it seems like a good guess would be the eye with the most negative and low vibrational aspects, because the symbolism from a lot of these people gets even more blatant. A lot of them will throw up what looks like that OK hand sign, and they'll usually put it right over their eye. And again, at face value, it seems like nothing, seems pretty innocent. But again, with these celebrities, we're dealing with a heavy promotion of the material world. And if you really look at that OK hand sign with the two fingers making a circle and then the three fingers going up, it kind of looks like 3 6s overlapping each other. It looks really similar. If you layer 3 6s on top of each other, you get something that looks almost identical to this hand sign. And one of the other places that you'll find 3 6s is with a hexagon. A hexagon has 6 sides, 6 vertices, and 6 angles. So a hexagon is giving you those 3 6s. But you also get 3 6s from carbon. About 98% of all carbon is what's called carbon-12. And carbon-12 is made up of 6 electrons, 6 protons, and 6 neutrons. Now remember, all organic life is carbon-based. So pretty much all organic life is going to be based on carbon-12. But here's the thing, there's also carbon-13 that makes up that other 1.5% of all carbon-based life. And carbon-13 has 6 protons, 6 neutrons, and 7 electrons. And again, carbon-13 makes up less than 1.5% of all organic life on the earth. While again, the majority of life on earth is based on carbon-12, those 3 6s. So the majority of the material world is based on 3 6s. And again, we've got these celebrities who heavily promote the material world and represent the highest level of physical success, throwing up what looks like 3 6s. And in a lot of cases, placing those 6s over their eye. And from the looks of it, that eye is ultimately taking you back to Saturn. And of course, we've got that hexagon on Saturn. And the hexagon, again, is going to take you back to 3 6s. And ultimately going to take you back to carbon-12, which is going to lead you to the physical world, or at least a good portion of it. So you have all these celebrities throwing up what looks like 3 6s. And it's another thing that they've been doing for decades. You got pretty much every single person with any type of notoriety, any type of fame doing it. There's almost not a time that you can't go back and find the people with stardom, the people with celebrity status throwing up this hand sign. I mean, it's just decades and decades of what seems like literally everybody doing it. All the people with the most influence over society. And again, all the people with the most material success. They're all throwing up 3-6s. And not just the actors, musicians, politicians, and the athletes. I mean, it's literally everybody with any type of influence. Everybody with the high level of material success in front of the public eye. At some point in their career, you'll find that they've flashed this hand sign. And again, it stretches across different industries and is spread out throughout history. And there's times when you'll see them throw this hand sign up, and they'll also be throwing up what looks like a set of horns right along with it. And it's easy to think nothing of it. But we know if you trace it back far enough, those horns can lead you back to the god Pan, the goat, the Baphomet, and all of that is going to ultimately lead you back to Satan. And just think about the connection. Again, you've got these celebrities seemingly playing a key role in keeping you focused on the material. So metaphorically helping to keep you chained to that black cube of the devil, keeping your attention focused on the things of the physical world, all of the things that the devil would use to pull you in and keep you trapped. You know, fortune, fame, material possessions, an abundance of physical pleasure, keeping you trapped in your root chakra. And like I said, some of these people may not realize just exactly what they're promoting. They might genuinely be completely out of the loop, but then there's the ones that take it to the next level, wearing clothes with the upside down pentagram, the Baphomet, and wearing all this stuff with the goat symbology right out in the open, wearing shirts with Aleister Crowley on them, walking around with shirts with his face on it, even with his "do what thou wilt" quote. Then you've got the celebrities that are literally walking around with the numbers 666, just blatantly letting you know exactly what they're about. 666 plastered big as day right on their shirt for everybody to see. I mean, we even know before Biggie Smalls passed away, he was planning on starting his own clothing line, and it was literally going to be called 666. And you can see him and the rest of Junior Mafia wearing some of the clothes just before he passed away. Again, seemingly just giving it to you outright what these people are about and what their role is in that position as the influencers of the masses. Biggie Smalls was all about promoting that low vibrational gutter hip hop. And a lot of people don't like to talk about it, but he got really dark with a lot of his lyrics. And this is the type of stuff that when you listen to it repeatedly, it can be really damaging to your mind because those lyrics are speaking to your lower nature. And even if it's not affecting you consciously, it can still be doing all types of damage to you subconsciously. But yeah, you got all these celebrities wearing all this different stuff, seemingly using all this different symbolism and throwing up all these different hand signs that all seem to go back to Satan, that seem to correlate with negative, low vibrational energy. Again, keeping you trapped in the material. Again, you'd be hard pressed to find an influential person who hasn't thrown up that okay hand sign. And here's the crazy part.